did distance himself in a press release, eventually, 8 months too late. He was the very last political figure in all of Brooklyn to disassociate himself from Vito. He did it during an election year. Form your own judgments, please. Steve was Vito's chief of staff. When he was elected to office, he was very clear about this fact that Vito was fully responsible for getting him elected. He called Vito his friend and mentor. He said everything he learned from Vito. These are direct quotes. It's not surprising that he sent so much money to Vito's nonprofit. It's not surprising that he appointed Vito's chief of staff to the board of Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's not surprising that he flipped on domino with Vito. Even if it's true that now you're distancing yourself, it's way too little, way too late.
Okay. Our district has been left out of city curbside compost pickup. The person who wrote the question would like to see us become leaders for green living, encouraging clotheslines, reduce, reuse, recycle, gray water use, etc. How would you help us do that?
Thank you, that's an excellent question. I will say that I've already advocated to the Department of Sanitation that Greenpoint be added to the pilot program. The pilot program right now for curbside compost pickup is actually very small. In Brooklyn, it's in Windsor Terrace. It's a small part of the pilot program. Already, over the last few weeks, I've met with them. I've advocated that this be expanded to every neighborhood in the 33rd District that wants it. And I think that I've heard a lot of enthusiasm for composting throughout this district, in particular in this neighborhood. And I actually have been helping with the compost bin in the backyard of the Milton Street Greenpoint Reformed Church over the last 8 or 9 months, and even though I've kind of neglected it over the last 2 months or so, it's been a great joy. So I encourage everybody to do your part in composting, and I'm working to get it expanded here at Greenpoint.
Let me just focus on one issue because we have limited time here. Our sewer systems are not sufficient currently, and one of the main problems is that when new developments come up, when they're being built, we're not also asking them to build out our infrastructure at the same time. If you look at the condos that line Baird Street south of McCarran Park, these are not huge. They're only 10 to 15 stories, and yet I've talked to residents of Baird Street and the surrounding areas, and they've said, people have lived there for 20, 25 years, that whenever there's a major rainstorm now, after these condos were built, their basements now flood, costing them thousands of dollars in damage. We need to make our developers build out infrastructure. We need to make them incorporate innovations like blue roofs and green roofs, things that trap our water and prevent sewage overflow. We also need to incorporate bioswales into our street designs. We need to do everything possible to keep our sewers from overflowing.
Going back to jobs, we discussed small business, but what about industry and manufacturing? Do hotels and clubs belong in the IBZ?
No, they don't. Absolutely 100%. They do not belong in the IBZ. The IBZ program, for those of you that don't know, the Industrial Business Zone, was set up by the Bloomberg administration to protect small businesses. We have several IBZs here in North Brooklyn. Unfortunately, the Bloomberg administration has proposed year after year to defund them to the point where they're having a hard time functioning. I have fought to restore the funding, and I succeeded in restoring the funding. But we need to do more in the next administration so that we're supporting local small manufacturers and industrial businesses. I am working right now with Councilmember Brad Lander and the other part of the district around the Gowanus area, coming up with a zoning framework that could allow for real mixed use. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we need in this neighborhood, real mixed use. So we have small manufacturers, room for residential, but that we're not crowding out the manufacturers or making the price point so high that manufacturers can't exist here. The future of New York City is in light industrial, commercial, and green tech jobs. We need to make sure that we're creating a framework and the infrastructure to allow that to happen here in North Brooklyn.
we actually fully agree on something, which is great. They have no place in the IBZs, and absolutely, we need to support our small businesses. The Bloomberg administration has continually prioritized these developments over our small businesses. And I go back to commercial rent stabilization. We need to implement this now, and we need to give businesses low interest and no interest lines of credit. The Small Business Coalition has one of our solutions to this, and I will work with them very closely to implement all those solutions.
Thank you. Okay, this one is sort of a two-parter. The general question is, what will you do as councilman to prevent further economic segregation on the waterfront? More specifically, 421A money is being poured into subsidizing the rich for waterfront property. What will you do as a councilman to stop this and prevent separation of lower and upper class in terms of income?
So I've been very encouraged over the last couple of weeks, actually, if you've been following the news, where this is an issue that is now taking on citywide significance. I think that Chris Quinn today was very critical of a project on the Upper West Side where it's being proposed. Part of the problem is we need to rethink how the inclusionary zoning program works and other programs that provide subsidies for housing so that they do not allow for really what is segregated housing. If you look at what's going on at the Edge and at Northside Piers, that is not the kind of neighborhood that we want, where affordable units or low-income units are in lower buildings, don't have access to the amenities that the upper-income units have. We cannot allow that to go forward, and I'm actually very encouraged that now this is taking on a citywide profile, and I'm looking forward to working with the new administration to make sure that that can't happen again. But specifically, we need to, any rezoning that comes forward that passes, then I want to make sure that any rezoning has a fully integrated affordable housing component and does not have segregated housing. That's not who we are in the neighborhood, that's not who we are in the city.
Absolutely agree, and I'm going to make a promise to you right now that when we negotiate with new developments, new developers, when we sign memorandums of understanding, MOUs, I will never sign off on a new building that has separate entrances.
Our next audience question. Last year, Two Trees Management bought Domino Sugar for $185 million. Now, Two Trees is asking for the rights to build 60-story towers and even more density in exchange for improving the plan by building 500,000 square feet of office space and more square feet of open space. What is your position?
Once again, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is blacked out. We were promised affordable housing, we were promised parks as part of the 2005 upzoning. We did not receive them. Now we're being told we can only get them if we agree to a 60-story monstrosity on our waterfronts. I will not tolerate this. As I mentioned before, there are still avenues of appeal. Section 197A zoning plans, suing over environmental impact statements under Article 78. I will absolutely take advantage of these 60 floors. We cannot accommodate that. Our transportation systems can't accommodate that, our sewage systems can't accommodate this, and I will fight it every step of the way.
Well, first I want to clear something up. Earlier, Mr. Pearson made an accusation that I flipped on the Domino project as a result of Ridgewood Bushwick receiving a loan. That's an outright falsehood, and I just want to make it clear that that did not happen. And if Mr. Pearson were around during the Domino rezoning in 2010, he would know that I was actually out there often alone fighting against that rezoning. In fact, there were 5 or 6 editorials in the Daily News attacking me personally for saying that it's going to overload the transportation infrastructure in the neighborhood. Mayor Bloomberg mocked me, and I was a large part with this community fighting against that just us. And we did not prevail. We did not prevail to stop that rezoning. But we need to make sure that at this point, been made very clear to Two Trees, who owns the property now, that our community is not for sale, and that I'm going to be extremely difficult with them. I have made it clear that I'm not for sale, and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that this community is served well. And if they don't provide the adequate number of affordable housing and a reasonably sized development, then I'm not going to support that rezoning.
I would just encourage you to look up a 2010 article from the New York Post with the title "Vito Flips for Domino" that tells a very good story.
Okay, so we're at the Polish Slavic Center right now, so I think this is an appropriate question. How are you going to engage the Polish community on issues of affordable housing, homelessness, and small business services?
Homelessness, as we all know, is a big issue here in Greenpoint. And we haven't invested enough in mental health services. Study after study shows that for every dollar we put into mental health services, we save $4 through reduced healthcare costs and prison costs. Investing more into mental health services is not only the moral thing to do, the ethical thing to do, but it's the financially sound thing to do. I will absolutely advocate for more mental health services in Greenpoint.
Since my very first days as city council member here in Greenpoint, I convened with Rami Metal, my Greenpoint liaison. He's now moved on to my legislative director, the Greenpoint Homelessness Task Force, where we've worked with Common Ground. We've worked with the Department of Mental Health and Mental Health, Department of Homeless Services, community leaders like Neil Sheehan, Pat McDonald, Erica Volker, and others who are dedicated to find a solution to this problem. We worked together. It took a long time and a lot of work. And we were able to get 10 beds for the homeless population here in Greenpoint. And as I said before, this was the first year where these guys had a place to go every